Good evening. Welcome to a late version of the Bible Challenge. It's 7 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock. And we are talking, maybe this evening will be the last time that we'll talk about Ephesians. We have already finished the book of Ephesians, but we're back in the book of Acts, chapter 19 and 20. We've been there for a couple days, and we're talking about some of the things that happened to Paul while he was at Ephesus, and his desire for these young Christians to stay the course and continue to trust the Lord. And today we're talking about a riot that took place at Ephesus, and it concerns the false god Diana. She was a false god that the people at Ephesus in that area worshipped. They had a big statue of Diana, and she was the god of fertility. And so they supposedly had a large statue that had fallen from Jupiter into their land, and they had it in the temple. And many of the people believed that this statue had fallen from Jupiter. And it just wasn't the normal statue. This statue, she was a female, but in the statue she had many breasts. And when the people came to the temple to worship her, they promoted orgies and sexual acts to be done inside and outside that temple. And so it was a very depraved religious spot. And there was a man that was making a good living by making little, almost like trinket, little versions of the statue of Diana, and was selling them. He was making them out of silver, and he was making a lot of money, and he had men working for him that were like an assembly line. And so I don't know how much money he was making, but he was making a good living. And along comes this man, the Apostle Paul, and he starts to draw people away from this false belief to following Jesus Christ. And this man recognizes this is hurting his pocketbook and his love of money, his profit. But he knows he has to be slicker than be the obvious, that he's upset because of the money. And so what he does is, under the guise of some other reason for the rioting, we got to rise up. It's a patriotic gesture. This man, the Apostle Paul, is coming in here and trying to take away who we are as a group of people. And he calls the people to be stirred, and some of those people acted like, that's right. We've got to stand up for who we are and what we are. We've got to oppose the Apostle Paul. They weren't wise enough to recognize that it really was the money, the loss of the money. But this man, he was making the people feel like, well, you got to stand up, and we have to defend who we are, and the patriotism. And it reminds me, there are some rioting, some people doing some riots under the guise of something that, this really matters, and that's not the issue at all. And the ones pulling the strings, controlling the rioters, are making a laughingstock out of those that are rioting, even now in our nation. And so listen a little bit of what it says here in Acts 19, starting in verse 21. It says, after these things were ended, Paul purposed in the Spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. And then, so he's got a plan, but it says, at the same time there arose no small stir about that way. That's no small stir about that way is about the way of Jesus Christ. And so as Paul's making plans what he's going to do next, there is a large stir, a large group of people that are changing their belief, their way of living, and then instead of following and worshiping Diana, now they have changed their heart and their mind, and they're worshiping Jesus Christ. That's what 23 is all about when it says, in the same time there arose no small stir about that way. That way is the way of Jesus. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen. He wasn't making just a little bit of money. He was making good money. And whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation. He gathered up all the guys that were gaining profit by making things to represent Diana. They made little tiny shrines and little statues. And he said, Sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth. He said, you know this is how we made our money. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods, which are made with hands. And so Demetrius is saying, Paul is saying that these gods are false gods. They're no gods at all. And it's hurting our business. So that not only this, our craft is in danger to be set at naught, we'll just have to close down. But also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worshipeth. And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion. There was a riot. And having caught Gaius and Articus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul would have entered into the people, the disciples suffered him not. They said, No, Paul, it's just going to get worse. They'll want to kill you. But verse 34 says, But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice about the space of 2 hours cried out, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And so just as some of the rioters and protesters are loudly proclaiming things, now this group is loudly proclaiming, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And that goes on and on. And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that city of the Ephesians is a worshipper of the great goddess Diana, of the image which fell down from Jupiter? And this man stands up and he quiets the crowd and he says, Everybody knows. This is what happened. This great statue, this great goddess Diana, it fell from the sky. It fell from Jupiter. And we've got it into everybody knows. That's the way it is. Seeing then that these things cannot be spoken against, ye ought to be quiet and to do nothing rashly. So he's trying to quiet the people down and say, listen, there's no need to riot. It's not going anywhere. Diana's staying right here. It was one of the ancient wonders of the world. And it says, Wherefore, verse 38, If Demetrius and the craftsmen which are with him have a matter against any man, the law is open, and there are deputies. Let them implead one another. And so, this man says, you just need to go to the police officers and get their help. Boy, little did you know that the Bible has a story that seems so similar to what's going on here in our nation right now. I've often said it. God's got something to say about everything. The good thing is that Jesus and the salvation plan of God was being broadcast, and lots of people were changing their heart and their minds, and they were coming to know Jesus. And of course, people were upset. Those that were set and entrenched in the old way. The devil doesn't want to give up the grip that he has on people's lives. But God is always, always stronger than the devil. So if you've got something you need to give to God, the devil's had a grip on your life, you can ask God to help you, and he'll free you from all that. He'll get you out of the chains that the devil's got you in. Have a blessed evening.